Following the loss of my husband to complications with a brain tumor, I found myself becoming what I viewed as a worse father. I was too deep in my grief to attend to the grief and needs of my daughters. I thought it best to take a weekend to myself to tackle my own problems so I can be more present. So I called my older brother Oscar and his wife Lillian and nearly begged them to watch the girls for a few days. They obviously were happy to. They picked them up later that day, and I got to my process of healing, getting very drunk and staying in bed mostly. When Monday came, I got my shit together as best I could and waited for my brother to drop them off. I was prepared to help them work through whatever they needed. As the hours ticked by without them showing, I began to worry. I called my brother's phone probably 50 times. His stupid voicemail message became the soundtrack to my panic. "You've reached Oscar 4 Leave a message after the 4 beep." Played out into the echoing walls of my house as I paced the halls. When the sun went down and I began to dial the police, a knock on my front door made me nearly jump out of skin. It was Lily. She looked very distraught. What I'm sure was mirrored thought she had upon seeing me. "Dean." She looked me up and down. "He didn't show up, did he?" We filed a missing persons report for Oscar and the girls. Before the night was over, they weren't found. I obviously could not accept that the police stopped looking after a few months, so I began searching on my own, often but not always with Lily's help. In a few weeks, I had combed the woods around the school the girls attended and Oscar's house, leaving no stone unturned. By this point, the people in my town that I had known my whole life had moved on with their lives and stopped dropping by to check on me, so I spent most days alone. One night, as I sat awake on my bed, far too late to be awake, something struck my mind that baffled me as to why I hadn't thought of it already. My brother's last work site. He did freelance construction and was assembling a modular home out in the woods. The police had briefly looked over the place, but what about the woods surrounding it? Against my better judgment, I began to get dressed and look for my car keys. I should have waited until morning, but I was so determined to find anything, even a mild clue as to where they had went. I called Lily and asked her for the address, and she groggily gave it to me, and I was on the way. When I arrived, I used the flashlight on my phone to get a look around. Part of the modular was collapsed at the back, but I wasn't concerned with that. The police had probably checked that out already. I was more concerned with the woods. I made my way to the tree line. I could see from a distance there was a steep drop-off just beyond it. As I got closer, I could feel my ankle roll on top of loose dirt, and I fell forward and down the drop-off. I don't remember a lot after that. I remember unbearable pain. I remember waking up in the hospital the next day with Lily at my side. I'd hit my back just right during the fall to paralyze myself from the waist down, but I honestly didn't care. Not like I had much to live for anymore. Anyway, instead, my mind stayed focused on that loose dirt. I couldn't explain why I was so fixated on it. It just felt important. With the new limitations of my wheelchair, I could hardly make it past my front yard, let alone to the site, not on my town's dirt roads. After a week or two of pestering, I finally convinced Lily to go search the area. It was raining hard that day. Of course it was. All the ground would be soft and muddy. Just as I expected, she came back with nothing. I thanked her anyway, and it continued to eat away at me for days, which became weeks, then months, and years. By the 3-year mark, I was basically just doing what was required to survive. I would eat, I would sit for hours, then sleep to start over. Lily had all but stopped talking to me by this point. My fixation was stunting her grieving process, so I respected her boundaries and lost her number. I had boosted myself out of chair and into bed, same as any other night. Just as I had began to dream, I heard a soft sobbing beside my bed. I opened my eyes to see a silhouette, hunched over, crying into its hands. I quickly flicked on my bedside lamp, and the figure shot its head up as it was bathed in the light. Its mouth hung open, and its eyes open wide, as if staring into the eyes of God. It was my brother. He looked different. His thick but short-trimmed, neat blonde hair and well-groomed walrus mustache had been replaced with a dirty, raggedy mop of shoulder-length hair and similarly filthy full beard. His tattered clothes were covered in blood, as was most of his face. "Oscar," I muttered, I'm so sorry." His voice was rough and rashly, as if those were the first words he'd spoken in a long time. Before I could process anything, he lunged at me, wrestling me to the other side of my queen. His fingernails dug into my throat like an animal's claws as he choked me. I mustered all my strength to punch him in the jaw with crack. I pushed him off of me and the bed as he clutched his face and groaned. I crawled as quickly as I could, tracking blood on my sheets to the other side of the bed and off to the ground beside my chair. I struggled with the footrest of my chair, pulling it off its hinge and wielding it like a small bat. He came barreling clumsily across the bed and towards me. Right when he got close enough, I cracked the footrest hard against his temple, and he fell limp on top of me. I pushed him off with much effort, and this rage boiled up inside me, this unbearable hot anger in my chest. I bashed the footrest into his face again, and another time. "Where are my children?" I screamed as I hit him again and again in the face and chest. After I caught myself and stopped battering him, I threw the footrest and crawled to my nightstand. I called the police. When the police arrived, they told me to my surprise that I hadn't killed him, and they took him in. 2 days later, an officer arrived at my house and told me that Oscar had confessed to what I'm going to tell you now. 3 years ago, on the Monday that Oscar was supposed to return my daughters, he picked them up from school and took them to his worksite to give me a few extra hours. The modular collapsed on the three of them. Oscar was mostly unharmed, but the girls, they were crushed and contorted. Delilah was still half alive, writhing when he pulled them out of the wreckage. He panicked and decided to put her out of her misery. Terrified to face Lily and I after what he had done, he buried them by the tree line and fled a few states away. After 3 years of his mind stewing in, its own guilt made him paranoid and unstable. He returned to tie up loose ends. He killed Lily in her sleep and then came to my house to do the same to me. Alice and Delilah, my beautiful girls, rest easy, and please forgive me. Forgive me for not being there for you how I should have. Forgive me for leaving you with him. Your bodies were unearthed and moved to the same cemetery as your father. I visit you every day. And Lillian, you are my closest friend. Even if you distanced yourself from me, I wish I could trade my life for yours. Oscar was always the black sheep of the family, a white blonde baby born to an all-black family. My father always said my mother had cheated, though she never admitted it, but treated him the same as me or our sisters. I have so many pleasant memories with him. Playing N64 with him in the basement turned his bedroom when he was a teen, him driving my sisters and I to the lake to swim when we were teens. But I don't think about that when his name is uttered anymore. All I can think of is how I'm going to get into the prison next town, over where he's serving life, and kill him. No Sleep removed this for Unacceptable Horror, BC, the mods all suck, cheese-covered toes.